All right, so Laura Fullerton, CEO and founder of Monk. Yeah, I've been seeing your ice baths like all throughout ads, Instagram, Facebook, all over the place. Haven't seen one in person, so I am very excited to talk to you in person, hear more about your company and the ice bath.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for having me.
Tell me about it. How'd you get started with this?
So, my journey personally was led through pure frustration. So, like I think many people, I've always hated being cold, but one day I got bullied into doing my first ice bath and honestly just fell in love with it. The clarity and the energy and the focus I had as a stressed out founder, it was just amazing. And I got hooked. But in the UK, the options on the market it was either a 12,000, I don't know what that is in dollars, a lot more, or, you've got these like cheap blow up things. And I just thought, why those my two options? And I nearly went down the route of making my own DIY ice bath, thousands of other people out there. But I just didn't want something that was clunky and ugly and was just going to take me, so much in terms of maintenance and everything. And yeah, it seems like the logical answer was to make my own.
That's awesome. How long did it take to do that?
So we've been in product development for about 2.5, nearly 3 years. So we've just launched in the UK. So we've been shipping our first units to customers, and the feedback so far has been brilliant, which is so exciting. Because after so long in R&D, to finally see it coming to life it's just the best thing ever. And this year for us is going to be huge because not only are we continuing to grow and scale, but we're also coming over the pond to your neck of the woods later this year.
That's awesome. So when do you expect to be selling in the United States?
Summer. So we've already gone live with pre-orders, but yeah, physically in the US, summertime.
Okay. And yeah, just for like the inside baseball, like what's the thought process behind launching ads like up to a year to 2 years before even selling having the product out to market?
We've really just wanted to test the water in the US and just see where people would be coming from in terms of location. So if we can, get a load of pre-orders, we can then fix our distribution strategy off the back of that, and also just gain an idea for appetite out there.
Got it. So have you been
Yeah.
seeing results from the United States?
Yeah. And I mean, we haven't been doing any performance marketing over there for the last few months now, but we're still getting sales in, which I think is just a really great sign of what's to come.
That's
Yeah.
amazing. So are you guys thinking about, putting like a location here, like a warehouse?
Yeah, we will. So I think it's either going to be in Phoenix or Houston. Still just figuring out all the fun, exciting details at the moment.
That's funny. I feel like there's a lot of ice bath companies in Phoenix, so it's a good place.
Oh, really? Okay, nice.
Yeah. Cool. So, and then why Monk? Why is it called Monk? What does that mean?
So I wanted a name that reflected the fact that, this isn't a new practice, right? People have been doing it for thousands of years, but it's blending that kind of old ancestral wisdom with 21st century engineering. So I wanted a name that kind of reflected that. And honestly, one evening, my friends and I were brainstorming names, and I said the word monk and then thought, nah, forget it. My friend was really excited. He was like, no, that's it. And then the weirdest thing happened. So the next day, he sent me a picture in the morning, just said, I kid you not, this just landed on my doorstep. There's no note, no sender, and I didn't order it. And it was the book, The Monk Who Sold His Ferrari. So I thought, that's got to be a sign. So yeah,
Okay.
we went with the name Monk, and it was available.
That's awesome. It's funny, like it's actually very refreshing to hear an ice bath company that doesn't have a name like Arctic Chiller Freeze Coldness. It's nice. It's just like, oh, it's Monk. It's easy. It's light
Yeah. Oh, thank
as a
you.
name.
And we didn't want to pigeonhole ourselves into, specifically cold water therapy because I guess our whole thing is about creating like happier, healthier people. For me, the amazing thing about ice baths is they're so powerful for all kinds of mental, physical, and emotional health. And maybe in future we'll branch into other complementary products. It left it slightly more open.
Right. Yeah. That's a good call. So tell me more about the product. So it has ozone.
Yeah. So it's got all the amazing functionality you'd expect, like ozone, small things like an inbuilt timer. But I think when we set out to create Monk, what was different about it is that, cold water therapy, as you know, for the last couple of years has been booming, which is amazing. But I think there's the real problem is that people don't know how to use it safely or effectively. And you see people online just hacking into frozen over lakes and jumping in. And if you're a beginner, you're going to have a terrible time. You're not going to enjoy it, and you're not going to want to, continue it and unlock the benefits. And as you know, if you were doing it for mental health or versus muscle recovery, use it in a really different way. And so we realized actually there's a bigger education piece here. And I think it's really fitting. I think it was the Telegraph, some paper called us the Peloton of the recovery world. And I think that's actually a really great analogy, because exercise bikes existed since the 1960s, right? There's nothing new about them. But then Peloton swoop in with this smart, connected, beautiful device, and it totally changed the game. And I think that's the opportunity that we've got with Monk. We really want to lead, transform, and really grow the cold water therapy movement. And that's why it's a smart ice bath. It also has this companion app that has these guided immersive plunges. So let's say you're a complete beginner, there's an acclimatization program, which will take you, down from 10 degrees Celsius down to 3 degrees over a number of sessions. So, like
That's
Peloton,
amazing.
you've got like the music and instructors, and it's just a really different immersive experience.
And that comes with the ice bath. You don't have to pay extra for that?
No, you don't have to pay extra for it. And we've also made it more widely available, so you don't just need the Monk hardware. Like if you had even a competitive unit or just your bath at home or whatever body of cold water, you could still benefit from the guidance.
Okay, that's really
And
cool.
also, thank you. Being a biohacker, I love data, and so we integrate with all kinds of different wearables like Whoop and Aura, so it actually pulls through your stats, so you can see how Monk will impact your sleep, your HRV, your resting heart rate over time.
Huh. That's amazing.
Thanks.
I can also see a world, I'm sure you guys have thought of it, but where you do even have like live cold plunging sessions where it's like you can just get people together.
Yeah, that's the thing. I think there's so much that can be done there in terms of community, because it is such a phenomenal, I don't even know what to call it. It's just like it's cultural movement that really does bring people together. And I think it's amazing that it's becoming cool to be healthy and just getting more people going and doing this and trying cold plunging rather than just, going to a bar. It's just a really exciting time to be in this space.
Yeah, that's amazing. And then as far as your ice bath, also, it's basically always on, right? So you have
Yeah.
water circulating the whole time.
Yeah. And you can
Good.
set different schedules if you want it to be at X degrees in the morning and a different temperature in the evening. It will just be there automatically for you.
Awesome. Yeah, that's a feature that I always look for with ice baths, that, some of these companies, they make a chiller that's like only meant to be turned on like an hour before you use it and stuff. I think that you need the water circulating all the time. So I was happy to see that yours has that feature.
Awesome.
You have the ozone. Are there any other features that make this a smart ice bath that we haven't
Yeah, so
touched
I
on?
mean, what is this? There's the integration with wearables. Yeah, the usual setting temperature and time. I think they're really, really the key ones. Yeah, because I
Yeah.
just think that cold water therapy, there's more and more research being done about it, which is fantastic. But if we can actually build a really large database of cold water therapy data and show how it impacts all different kinds of areas of health, and one area that I'm personally so fascinated by is how females should be using cold water therapy. And so at some point, we're going to be able to integrate with other kind of menstrual tracking apps and actually see how you can, and also how you shouldn't use it in certain phases to really, really enhance health.
Right. Yeah. And that's a good segue to the next topic, which I obviously did want to talk about, which is women's health in regards to cold plunging. So what specific advantages to cold plunging do you see for females as opposed to males?
So it varies throughout the cycle, because as I'm sure you know, and lots of the listeners will know, women aren't just small men. And research, not just on cold water therapy, but research in general, is typically just based on male physiology. And that's typically because, the hormonal changes in a woman's body are just viewed as too many variables. So it's just easier to exclude them, which actually leaves a huge gap in literature. And obviously in this context, cold exposure, I don't think it's talked about enough right now as to how females should use it. And I think everyone's pretty familiar by now with the circadian rhythm, right? Your 24-hour sleep-wake cycle. But on top of that, women have a 28-day infradian rhythm, which is essentially a menstrual cycle. But I think it's such a disservice to women that we're not taught about this, but you think, okay, cool, that's all just about your period, but actually it's not. It affects 6 really like major systems in our body. So your microbiome, brain, stress response, metabolism, and of course the reproductive system. So, it kind of governs our lives. And in reality, there are 4 kind of key phases within that. And those phases have huge shifts that impact our energy, our resilience, and our physiological needs. And I think really interestingly, women's responses to cold water exposure can vary significantly within those phases. And so if you learn how to align it with your menstrual cycle, you can actually harness those shifts to really optimize your recovery, your resilience, and also not overstress your system.
Wow. So yeah, so basically, I know the data is not even close to where it needs to be, but like you can see a world where a woman's menstrual cycle, let's call it 28 days, throughout that 28-day periods, there's times where they should be ice bathing, maybe should be ice bathing colder, warmer, not at all.
Yeah,
and they could really optimize that cycle throughout that 28-day period.
Yeah. I'll give you like an overview as to kind of how I see it and how I talk about it. So yeah, you've got those 28 days, and there's really 2 kind of key phases within that. So you've got follicular and luteal. And so in the follicular phase, it's, days typically 1 to 14. So it's 2 weeks. And the first week of that is typically your period. And throughout that, your hormones, we're talking about estrogen, progesterone, luteinizing hormone and follicle stimulating hormone. That's when they're like at their lowest and they're just starting to rise up. So during the period itself, I would never really cold plunge. But as you kind of start to come out of that, that's a good time to start tapering it up again. So around week 2, that's when estrogen levels are higher and the body has higher thermogenesis, meaning it's more efficient at producing heat and activating brown fat in response to cold exposure. So that's a really good time to start really increasing it. And then just after follicular, you have ovulation, which a lot of women call like their power phase. That for me is just like peak existence. That is when you just feel amazing. And it's when estrogen is at its peak, it's also associated with just that higher tolerance to the cold. So if you're wanting to do either longer or colder sessions, like that is the best time to do it. And also you typically have greater energy levels. So for me, like strength training, that's when I go heaviest. And yeah, that is just creme de la creme of those 28 days. And then after that, that's when you go into luteal. And I kind of break it into 2. I say there's like early luteal phase and late luteal phase. So in the early phase, that is when progesterone just starts to begin to rise and estrogen starts to decline. And that can make you more sensitive to stress, including, the cold shock from cold water therapy. So it's at that point I'll start tapering it off. I'll still cold plunge, but it might just be at a higher temperature or slightly, shorter sessions, and really just pay attention to how I actually feel. I think it's in this phase as well where blood flow, it tends to remain close to the skin and reduces circulation back to the organs. So again, you're much more sensitive to the cold.
Right. And that's like the final week of the 28 days.
Second final week, you then have one more final week. So then you go into like late luteal phase. And that's the phase where I wouldn't cold plunge at all.
Okay.
I think it just puts like way too much stress on your body.
So yeah, so you're basically that last week of the 28-day cycle, you would advise not to, and then the first week when you have your period, you would advise not to.
Yeah, or towards the end of that first week, that's when you can start tapering back. So yeah, so like the latter half of it, I would, but yeah, definitely for late luteal, I just don't do it at all.
Cool, yeah, and this obviously is dependent on every different person and their stuff, but you saying that with your app and everything, you could track this, so you could really just dial it in.
And I just can't wait till when we start seeing more data around that. And I was listening to a podcast recently with Dr. Stacey Sims. I think it was probably on Huberman's podcast, and she mentioned a absolutely fascinating pilot study. So she was looking at, I think it was females with severe endometriosis. And what they did is they got them cold plunging 10 days around ovulation. And within 3 menstrual cycles, the symptoms were almost non-existent, which is just wild. it blows my mind that by doing something as simple as just going in cold water, you can potentially just almost remove conditions that can be so debilitating.
That's amazing. And that's really what biohacking is at its core, just optimizing your life.
Yeah.
What about as far as menopause? Have you done any research into that?
Yeah, I've looked at a couple of studies around that. There was one, I think it came out last year in, was it Sage Journals? And they looked at just over 1,000 women. And they were looking, I believe, at postmenopausal and perimenopausal. And although, especially when people are menopausal, they're not going to be affected by a menstrual cycle, but it showed that cold water therapy still brought really great benefits. I think it was some of the symptoms that you typically experience, like hot flushes and issues with temperature regulations, like night sweats and things like that. The cold water therapy was really, really impactful for. I think, don't quote me on this, but it was about a 46% reduction in anxiety. And then similar stats for like mood stability and just decreasing in hot flushes as well. So yeah, I think it's been really profound for many phases.
Yeah, yeah. I would think that's pretty hard to argue with that. It would probably be really good for menopause.
Yeah.
Cool. So yeah, as far as obviously you're into ice baths and cold plunges, what other biohacking modalities are you into?
Oh gosh, so many, and a lot of it very much on the holistic side, as well as the higher tech health side. So I would say, I mean, sauna and cold plunge have to be, and just exercise, like predominantly weightlifting are my kind of 101s. Although one thing I have just started doing, I was listening to, I think it was Peter Attia, who was just talking about, really great markers of longevity, things like grip strength. So a group of friends and I are doing a challenge in 2025, and it has a few things that you've got to be able to dead hang for 2 minutes. Another one is VO2 max. And this is one that has always terrified me. I don't know if you ever did it at school in like PE or your equivalent of what we call PE, physical education. And we had to do VO max training where you've got the mask on and you're on a bike and people are passing out or throwing up. And that to me was just terrifying. But I know how important VO2 max is. And so I'm doing, I think it's the Cooper test. I think that's what it's called, where you run for 12 minutes and you can kind of correlate the distance and using your age and a couple of other things to roughly work out your VO2 max. And you've got to get into the superior category. So that's something I'm working on at the moment.
That's cool. And that's just a lot of running and training to get there?
Yeah, well, I'd say a lot of, but again, it's interesting because it comes back to the whole 28-day infradian rhythms. There's only really like 2 weeks where I would do that kind of training. So yeah, we'll see where I get to with that.
That's really interesting.
Yeah, but then I think more broadly, I mean, all sorts. Like I said, I'm a sucker for data, so I do use Whoop and Aura. They're not things I check daily, but just generally prioritizing sleep and recovery is, I guess, quite a big part of my life, as well as nutrition and yeah.
Right. So you're wearing an Aura ring 24/7?
Yeah. Yeah.
That's cool.
And actually, one of the co-founders of Aura Ring became one of my investors in Monk, which was awesome.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
So it goes without saying that so Monk is going to be connected with the Aura ring if it's not already.
Yes, no, it is already, yeah.
Damn, that's incredible.
Thanks. What about you
amazing that
in
he's an
terms of
investor.
biohacks and lifestyle?
I mean, I'm always tinkering and adjusting things. Right now, my obsession is light. So just trying to, get the lights in my house more yellow, more orange, less white. Especially in the winter time, trying to just get outside and get sunlight on my skin, and really just trying to not be under artificial light at all. Really, like one of my biggest takes lately is just like, I see these gyms and they're supposed to be like beacons of health. And then it's like everyone's just working out under artificial light. And I think that artificial light is almost worse than fast food.
Do you know something super, super interesting and just bizarre that you say that? When you kindly asked me to come on this podcast and you said, oh, think of something that's like your controversial take. And the thing I was going to say is that I think malillumination is the same as malnutrition.
So that's what
And
I've never heard that
it,
term,
like,
masillumination.
yeah, it was. I heard it
And that
from a
was,
guy.
wait, so that was your cold take that you wrote down for the show?
Yeah,
Oh my,
yeah.
that's
How
incredible.
crazy. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
I was listening to a podcast. I just love podcasts with, I think his name is Ari Whitten, and he
Okay.
talks a lot about sunlight. And that was his point. He said, in terms of measuring the effect, the avoidance of sun is the equivalent of smoking a pack of cigarettes a day.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I certainly believe it. And that's the kind of thing too, where like, there just can't be proper studies on this type of thing. Like, we're not going to be able to measure what it's like for someone to go to work 9 to 5, sit under artificial light their whole life and see what that does. There's no control for it because there's no one that's never done that.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
we'll just never
Unfortunately,
know.
we are the living experiment, right?
Yeah, of course. And then dermatologists want to tell you that the sun causes skin cancer, but there's no way to prove that maybe it's artificial light that's causing the skin cancer. You know, we're all under artificial light all day.
Yeah.
And then no one's really under the sun that much anymore because the sun is, forbidden now. And then,
Yeah.
the dermatologists want to say, "Oh, well, it's the sun that's doing this." And it's like, I don't know about that.
Yeah. After this, I'm going to send you a link. I think it was Wellness Mama's podcast. Have a listen to it. I think you'll love it because he goes deep in all the science on it. It's fascinating.
That's amazing.
What's your favorite cold plunge?
Well, my favorite cold plunge is an inexpensive cold plunge. And obviously, like, I have a couple things that I need in my cold plunge, which would be, ozone, and then the chiller to be running 24/7. Right now I'm using the mod plunge. I don't know if you've heard of that one.
No.
So I'm using the mod plunge. What I like about that is that it's like a modular system. So like it's sort of like a half DIY, half built for you. But basically I like it because if parts break or whatever, you could just kind of swap them out and you can like add to the system, which I like. So I've since been able to add ozone and everything. So that's
Oh,
what
great.
I've been using lately. It's a good feature.
Awesome.
Yeah.
And how do you typically use it? Like when do you cold plunge? What's your routine? I love hearing about people's routines.
Yeah, I mean, definitely. I mean, I also live across the street from the Atlantic Ocean here in the Jersey Shore. So like in the winter time, like I'm really not cold plunging in my tub. Well, actually, it's like off limits anyway because I took it in for the winter, so things won't freeze up. But then in the summer, spring, and fall, it's usually I really just try to like wake up and just get in there without thinking about it. Since I've been doing this a lot, I was like way more concerned with like time. I think that's kind of like stupid now as far as like, I just have to stay in here for like 4 minutes. Now it's more like, just kind of go in there and just enjoy and just wake up really. Less pressure and counting. Social portion of the show. Let me pull this up. All right, so you can see my screen. Mm-hmm. Right, you see the guy?
I do.
Okay, so now we're going to watch this.
Wow.
Okay, so the question is, and me and my girlfriend got into a little debate over this. Is it more difficult to cold plunge in an ice bath like the monk or do what he did, surf in the snow? Keep in mind, he didn't actually go in the water. So my girlfriend's argument was sort of that the wind was cold. Because he didn't go in, it actually made it harder for himself. Your thoughts? Which is more difficult?
I would agree with your girlfriend. I think it's harder doing what he did because also moving water is, it feels colder anyway, right? Whereas you're in an ice bath, although you can move a little bit so you don't get that film, being out in the sea when it's just like smacking you in the face, I think it's also the unpredictability of it that just makes it harder.
Yeah. That's the same sentiment my girlfriend had. I kind of was like, well, he was wearing a hat. He was definitely, I think he did a really good job with it.
Yeah, he
It's
did
a
a
tough
great
call.
job. I think the other thing that makes it harder is that he has to run all the way down. It's like if you're in an ice bath, you can get out and you're out. Although, yeah, maybe the ground will still be cold, but I don't know, maybe you have flip-flops there. But he has to go quite a lot of effort. Like when he decides I'm done, I've got to get out, he's still quite a way to go. Like you're
Yeah.
invested.
Yeah. Do you think it would have been harder for him had he submerged his whole body or easier for him?
I think easier.
Yeah. I tend to think that too.
Yeah. Although actually getting out and running back, that bit would probably be harder with the wind. Like that, yeah. Hats off to that guy. He did a good job.
He did. It was a good video. Cool. So, Laura Fullerton, where can people find you?
They can find me at Discover Monk on Instagram and on the website. And also I'm at Laura Fullerton.
This is the Cold Plunge Podcast with me, Mike Gorman. Be sure to check out the video version of this podcast on our YouTube channel and check the show notes for any references, studies, or links to anything I spoke about on our website at plungereviews.com/podcasts.